Hello there, welcome back to my channel. Yes, I have something very interesting for you today as usual. Now, I was kinda unsure of what I should actually title this video. Whether I should title it the Seventh-day Adventists and their Clear Word Bible, Seventh-day Adventists and their Clear Word Bible, or title the video Seventh-day Adventists and the Clear Word Bible. And I figured that titling it Seventh-day Adventists and their Clear Word Bible would actually be like a giveaway as to me saying to the viewers automatically that Seventh-day Adventists have a Bible that they make that is called the Clear Word Bible. And so I don't think that would have caught the interest of people as much as if I give it this title which says Seventh-day Adventists and the Clear Word Bible. For then, if you're not an Adventist, you'll want to know what is this guy talking about, right? So I figured giving it this title would actually be far a better option than the previous title that I mentioned. Now, just as the title suggests, we will be talking about the Clear Word Bible. Now, the Clear Word Bible is a Bible which is supposed to be a paraphrase, they say. You understand? And it's written by an Adventist called Jack J. Blanco. My apologies for the lighting of the video going down. But yeah, the name of the person is Jack J. Blanco. Now, you are going to so love what I'm going to talk about in this video. You see, this Clear Word Bible, that is supposed to be a paraphrase, much like the amplified version. You understand? And it is so unique. You understand? It is so unique. I figured to myself, Kisma, you just have to talk about this Bible. When I say it's unique, I mean that when you compare it with different translations, even the amplified version, which is basically a paraphrase, you find that it's radically different from all translations. You understand? No, it is very much like the Jehovah's Witness Bible called the New World Translation, right? It is much like them in the sense that their Bible too is very different from other translation. So different that it wouldn't be fair. It is so different that it wouldn't be fair to call it a translation, but rather call it just say it's a different Bible. It's another Bible. You understand? A Bible entirely different from other Bibles. Now, I'm going to prove this to you, And how I'm going to prove this to you, how vastly different it is that I'm going to read some selected verses from the Clear Word Bible and compare it with different translation, primarily the Amplified version, which is supposed to be a paraphrase, just like the Clear Word Bible. You understand? And you see how different it is from other translation. Now, of course, I'm not going to just go through random verses, but I'm going to select verses, right, that would basically put Seventh-day Adventists teaching. I'm going to select verses that would basically put Seventh-day Adventist teaching in a negative light. You understand? So that's what I'm going to do here, and that way you can see the apparent bias and you can see the agenda behind the person who actually make this Bible. Now you're going to say that, Kisma, you can't use one person to judge the entire Seventh-day Adventist Church. And to that I agree and say you're right. But you see, had it not been for if the Seventh-day Adventist Church was not selling these Bibles in their store, you understand? If they didn't have it in their store for all Adventists who wants to purchase it, then I would have no grounds to judge them. You understand? If it was just one single person who just decide to just make a Bible and it's not being endorsed by the church. But the church endorses this Bible. They wouldn't mind if every single Adventist get a copy for themselves. You understand? Now, to be fair, even though the church itself makes such a Bible, not everyone are in support of such a move from the Seventh-day Adventist Church in making such a Bible like this, that that differs radically from the actual translation of the Greek and the Hebrew text. You understand? A lot of them are not in agreement with it. So I'm being fair. But nevertheless, this Bible expresses the sentiments of Adventists in how they interpret scripture and their particular methodology of study, which is proof texting and eisegesis, and not exegesis and biblical hermeneutics, which all scholars endorse and which every single theological school recommends as the proper method of study, or the proper method of how to study the Bible. So it is not under the basis of exegesis and hermeneutics, but it's under proof texting and eisegesis. And by the time I go through these texts, you're going to see, because it expresses the sentiments of Adventism, and it will give you some insight as to how the Seventh-day Adventist Church actually study the Bible. You understand? So that being said, with no further ado, I'm going to get through the text. I'm going to choose texts that talk about the investigative judgment, though just a few. And I'm going to look at texts that talks about the law and the covenants, the Sabbath, and also dietary laws. You understand? And you're going to see how much how much bias they insert into this Bible, how much bias is inserted into it. Now, beginning with the investigative judgment. Sorry, I had to change position just now. Yes, so for time's sake, I'm just going to use the Amplified Version, compare it with the Amplified Version and the King James Version. I'm not going to use any other translation. Why I'm going to compare it with the KJV? Because they are KJV onlys. So I figure I should compare them with the KJV and also the Amplified Version. Why? Because the Amplified Version would be like a paraphrase. I'm going to show you what's the difference between a genuine paraphrase Bible and one that is not so genuine, that has an agenda behind it. You understand? So the first thing I'm going to look at is the investigative judgment, right? Which starts at or gets its force primarily from Daniel chapter 8 verse 14. I'm going to look at verse 13 and 14 and tell you what the clear word says. Now the clear word Bible reads thus. Verse 13 to 14. It says, "The Holy One said something to my angel who asked him, 'How long will the little horn be allowed to transgress so rebelliously and pervert the truth about God and the heavenly sanctuary? How long will all these things go on and the little horn's power last?'" Now, if you look at the Amplified Version, the Amplified Version said, "Then I heard a Holy One speaking, and another Holy One said to the one that spoke, 'For how long is the vision concerning the continual offering, the transgression that makes desolate, and the giving over of both the sanctuary and the host of the people to be trampled underfoot?'" Now notice that heavenly sanctuary is not in the Amplified Version. Tell you what, to make things easier, I would suggest that you download the Amplified Version Bible and Play Store so that you can make your comparison while you're watching this video. Right? Just download it on Play Store and open your King James Version Bible while you're watching this video, and you'll see the difference. Right? As I compare it with the KJV, with the Clear Bible, should say. Now you notice heavenly sanctuary is not mentioned in the Amplified Version, and neither is it in the KJV. If you have a multi-translation app, which you can download as well, you'll realize that no single Bible translation have heavenly sanctuary recorded in that text. You understand? It's not there. And if you look at the Hebrew word, you understand? If you look at it in the Hebrew, download the Strong's Concordance, you will not find anything that suggests a heavenly sanctuary in that text. Now let's look at verse 14. "He answered, after 2,300 prophetic days, bracket, open bracket, which represent actual years, close bracket, God will restore the truth about the heavenly sanctuary to its rightful place. Then the process of judgment will begin, of which the yearly cleansing of the earthly sanctuary was a type, and God will vindicate his people. If you look at the Amplified Version and the KJV, it says nothing of the sort. Check any other translation as well. You notice each of them will bring across the point differently, but ultimately you'll get the same meaning. However, when you look at this version, you realize that this is saying something entirely different. You understand, talking about the truth of the sanctuary and about days which represent actual years. You won't find any translation that says that. Now that being said, let us look now to the book of Hebrews and see what they have to say in that. Oh dear, this is just so, when I look, I just have to laugh, pardon me if I'm laughing. Hebrews chapter 8 verse 13, clear word. When God talked about a new covenant, he was not talking about doing away with the covenant of righteousness. He had made with the covenant of righteousness, he had made with Abraham. But the Levitical covenant, which has now become obsolete and old. Look at the Amplified Version and look at the KJV and check every single translation. None of them says anything of the sort. It's not talking about the doing away with the covenant of righteousness he had made with Abraham. You see, the text says, when he had said a new covenant, he had made the first old, and what is become old is now ready to vanish away. You understand? Something like that it says. So it's literally telling you that the old covenant, it has become old and it's ready to vanish away. They're saying he was not talking about doing away with the covenant of righteousness that God made with Abraham. You see how desperate they are. Now looking at verse Hebrews 9. Hebrews 9. Under the Levitical covenant, clear word, there were specific rules for worship connected with a man-made sanctuary. When the Levites put up the sanctuary tent, they placed a 7-branch candlestick on the table with the consecrated bread behind the first curtain in the part called the holy place. Behind the second curtain was that part of the sanctuary called the most holy place. Right? While the golden altar of incense was in the holy place, its function had to do with the most holy place. In the most holy place itself was the golden ark, inside of which was the golden pot filled with manna, Aaron's rod that had budded, and the 2 tables of stone on which the 10 commandments were written. Now, if you read any other translation, it will tell you. If you read any other translation, you'll notice that it doesn't mention it mentions tables of the covenant. In any translation you look at. But with the Clear Word Bible says, and the 2 stone, right? Slabs of the covenant are tables of the covenant. So it identifies the 2 stones, which is the slabs of the covenant, bearing the 10 commandments. So you notice that even the Amplified Version, which is a paraphrase, it makes it clear that 10 commandments, that those two stones, it is the slabs of the covenant, are the tables of the covenant. You understand, which is the 10 commandments. And it's bracketed so that you know that paraphrase bearing the 10 commandments, because 10 commandments is not in the text. But it paraphrases it and say the 10 commandments. But the good thing with the Amplified Version, it identifies the fact that it is the slabs or tables of the covenant. But they don't put it in it that it's the tables of the covenant. You understand? Because it's the same tables of the covenant which is identified in Hebrews 8 verse 13, because the 10 commandments constitute the very words of the covenant. You understand? And it is that covenant in Hebrews 8 verse 13 that has become old and now ready to vanish away. So they make certain that they don't put in Hebrews 9 verse 4 tables of the covenant in the text, because they don't want the members to understand that the 10 commandments are the very words of the old covenant. They don't want them to see that. You understand? But I'm going to look at some more verses and show you. Now we are going to look at Galatians. Right, we are going to look at Galatians now and see what Galatians has to say for us. Galatians chapter 3, verses 23 to 24. This is what the clear word says. Sorry, my bad. This is what the clear word says. I'm going to look at verse 24 to 25 instead. So the law, clear word, so the law functioned as a teacher to point us to Christ until he would come and verify that God's plan of salvation was based on faith and not on works. Verses 25. Now that God's promise to Abraham has been shown to be true, we no longer need the law hovering over us to point us to God's promises. Right? Now, the Amplified Version says in verse 25 that, but now that the faith has come, we are no longer under a trainer. Paraphrase, the guardian of our childhood. So you see how the Amplified Version actually paraphrase it? The trainer is the guardian of our childhood. But they say in the clear word, right, is that now that God's promise to Abraham has been shown to be true, we no longer need the law hovering over us to point us to God's promise. So what they are saying is that we as Christians, we don't have the law hovering over us to point us to God's promise. It is not saying what the Bible is saying, and that we are no longer under the law. No. Rather, we no longer need the law to hover over us to show us God's promise, because Christ did it already. But you don't necessarily need the law, you know. You just don't need it to hover over you to show you God's promise. That's what they are saying. You see how vastly different this is from Amplified Version. Check any translation, and none of them will say the same thing that this is actually saying. Now let's look at same Galatians 3 verse 19. Clear word. Then what was the promise? What was the purpose of the law? It was given in addition to the promise to be sure. It was given in addition to the promise to be sure that our people would know what wrongdoing was. The law would also focus their faith on the promised one until he came. Furthermore, even though God, accompanied by thousands of angels, spoke his law at Sinai, a human go-between such as Moses was needed. Now, if you look at the Amplified Version in verse 19, it reads thus: what then was the purpose of the law? It was added later on, paraphrase, later on after the promise, to disclose and expose to men their guilt because of transgression, and to make men more conscious of the sinfulness of sin. And it was intended to be in effect until the seed, which is the descendant, the heir, should come, to and concerning whom the promise had been made. And the law, was arranged and ordained and appointed through the instrumentality of angels, and was given by the hand in the person of a go-between, Moses, an intermediary person between God and man. Notice that the Amplified Version says it was intended to be in effect until the seed, etc., etc. And that's the key part, you know. Until, that word until there, you will see it in every single translation. But you notice with this verse, it's not in it. Because the word until, you know, suggests an expiration date, you know. You understand? So this clear word completely removes that. You understand? And this is what they want to get in the minds of Seventh-day Adventists. And if you're an Adventist watching this, I want to ask you, I just want to challenge you to think, why do they have to go? Why did the writer have to go this far? You understand? To deliberately remove things from out of it, if they didn't recognize that there's an obvious problem with the text for them. Just think about it. If it wasn't a problem, why they had to remove that from out of it? You understand? This is something for you to think about. I'm sorry, if I said Galatians chapter 4 verse 19, I meant Galatians 3 verse 19. No. Now let's look at Romans chapter 6 verse 14. Clear word. Sin, clear word. Sin can't rule over you, because you're no longer under the law which holds you guilty, but under grace which sets you free. So you're no longer under the law which holds you guilty, but you're under grace which sets you free. The part where they said no longer under the law and add which holds you guilty, you won't find that in no Bible translation. You won't find that in the Amplified Version either. Because what Seventh-day Adventists have it to say, whenever the Bible says you're no longer under the law, it really means you're not under the guilt or condemnation of the law. You're not really not under the law, You're still under it. You're just not under the guilt, right? Or the condemnation of the law. Right? So that's eisegesis there, where they read into, where they insert their own ideas onto the text. You understand? That's eisegesis right there for you. You understand? And that's what they did with Romans 6 verse 14. Look at the Amplified Version, you'll see something different. And look at any other translation and you'll see something different as well. And to now further prove to you, look at Romans chapter 7 verse 6. We are going to read from the clear word. But now we are delivered from the condemnation of the law, because our sinful lives have died. We are no longer slaves to the law of sin, but serve God willingly and joyously with a new spirit, not in the old way of obeying just the letter of the law. Now hear what Amplified Version says. But now we are discharged from the law and have terminated all intercourse with it, having died to what once restrained and held us captive. So now we serve not under obedience to the old code of written regulations, but under obedience to the promptings of the Spirit in newness of life. Now if you doubt what the Amplified Version is saying, look at any other translation and you'll find it saying, it may put it out differently, but ultimately it will say the same thing. What you will not find is no translation saying, but now we are delivered from the condemnation of the law. That's eisegesis there, inserting that word condemnation of the law. It is not founded, the word condemnation is not founded in the text. Look at any Strong's Concordance in verse 6 of Romans 7. Condemnation is not there. You understand? So they insert that into it because they want to give off the idea that when the Bible says you're not under the law, you're really not under the guilt or the condemnation of the law. Not necessarily not under the law, You understand? You're just not under its condemnation because Christ has spared you from that. So in reality, you're still under the law. That's eisegesis there. It is not there in the text. And if there wasn't a problem with their theology, they wouldn't have to do all of this. You understand? I'm going to go through a few more verses, then I will close. Yes, now let's look at Romans chapter 14. Romans chapter 14, I'm not going to read all the verses. I'm just going to look at verse 14 and verse 20. Now this is what verse 14 says. Right? Verse 14 says, clear word, as one who has been enlightened by Jesus Christ, I am convinced that nothing which he created to be for food for man is unclean within itself. But if some consider clean foods to be unclean, then it's wrong for them to eat them. Right? So what they're saying, in this clear Bible, of course, if you read the Amplified Version, the Amplified Version says, I know and am convinced or persuaded as one in the Lord Jesus that nothing is forbidden as essentially unclean, defiled and unholy. So it is saying there is absolutely nothing that is unclean. But nonetheless, it is unclean or defiled to anyone who thinks it is unclean. But they're saying here in the Clear Word Bible, that anything that God, whatever that Christ created to be for food. So it's to let you know that there are some things that Christ created to be food for man, right? Is unclean. Nothing that he created to be food for man is unclean in itself, right? But if anyone consider clean foods to be unclean. So what they're saying in there is that Paul is saying, if anyone consider clean foods to be unclean, then it's wrong for them to eat it. But this is not what Paul is saying. Paul is saying if anyone consider anything at all unclean, right? Whether it want to be pork, whether it want to be shrimp, whether it want to be lobster, whether it want to be chicken, whether it want to be mutton or curry goats, depending on what you call it if you're a non-Jamaican. You understand? Or whether it want to be beef, nothing is unclean. Absolutely nothing, whether pork or chicken. But they're saying if some people consider clean foods, so this limits it to only certain foods now, you know, such as chicken for them and mutton and beef. So it is saying that if anyone consider any of those so-called clean things to be unclean, then it's wrong for you to eat it. That's what this is actually saying here. But if you read any other translation, what you'll get is that anyone who consider anything at all to be unclean, then they shouldn't eat it. So you see the agenda behind it. Now verse 20. To make an issue over food destroys what God is trying to do. Even if certain foods are alright to eat, right? It's still wrong for anyone to show off his freedom in Christ by eating what offends others. So this is telling you that there are certain foods that are alright to eat. Not all foods, you know. Certain foods are alright to eat. So even if those certain foods which are alright to eat, you just eat it like that to offend someone, and it will offend someone, then you shouldn't eat it. Now use your common sense now. The things that Seventh-day Adventists say are alright to clean. No, scratch that. Scratch that. Look at the Amplified Version. You must not, for the sake of food, undo and break down and destroy the work of God. Everything is indeed ceremonially clean and pure, but it is wrong for anyone to hurt the conscience of others or to make them fall by what he eats. So this is saying that everything is ceremonially clean and pure. But this is saying something different. This is letting you know that it's only certain things, you understand, are clean. Oh Lord. No, there is no way I can do a video like this and not look at 2 Corinthians 3. Oh my. When I was getting my awakening, you understand, and I was studying the law, when I read 2 Corinthians chapter 3, I nearly had a heart attack when I realized that I was following something that is called or dubbed the ministration of death, condemnation, a letter that kills. I nearly had nightmares when I think about, I was saying to myself, how could I possibly be following something that can only kill me, that can only condemn me? You're going to love how the Clear Word Bible actually paraphrases 2 Corinthians chapter 3. Yes, so I'm going to look at verse 6. So I'm just going to read from verses 6 onwards from the Clear Word. Now this is what the Clear Word says. It is God who has made us ministers of the new covenant. He has helped us share the gospel with you, not as attorneys, but as ambassadors. The law can't give you life. It can only point out sin. It's the Holy Spirit who gives you life. Now, if you look at the Amplified Version, it will tell you specifically that it says, it is he who has disqualified us, making us to be fit and worthy and sufficient, as ministers and dispensers of a new covenant of salvation through Christ, not ministers of the letter of legally written code, but of the Spirit. For the code of the law kills, but the Holy Spirit makes alive. That's what it said in it. Tell you that the code of the law, that it kills. The ESV says, for the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. NASB, for the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. NLT, but under the new NLT, the old written covenant ends in death, but under the new covenant, the Spirit gives life. KJV, for the KJV only is. Many Adventists are KJV only. So I'm speaking to the KJV only now. Your own KJV says, for the letter killeth, but the Spirit gives life. So you notice that they totally remove the kill part from out of it. They totally they remove the kill part from out of it. No, listen to verse 17. Listen to verse 17. Verse 7 should say, sorry. At Sinai, God wrote the law on tables of stone. The giving of the commandments was accompanied by such glory that when Moses came down from the mountain, the Israelite couldn't even look at him. But that glory had to pass away. So I'm happy that they pointed out that the glory that Moses had in the whole giving of the tables, the law and tables of stone, it had to pass away. But what they didn't identify, is that the law mentioned on tables of stone, it is the ministration of death. That's not in the text there. They totally removed that. If you look in the amplified version, any other translation, you will see ministration of death mentioned there. Now, if you look at verse 9 in the clear word, says, if that system of religious services containing only promises of salvation was full of glory, how much more glorious is God's offer of salvation today, now that those Old Testament promises has been fulfilled and ratified by Jesus Christ. Right? So you notice in verse 9, it call it if that system of religious service. These other translation lets it know, that it is the ministration of condemnation. That's what it reads in verse 9 in every single translation. You understand? Ministration of condemnation. Even the amplified version call it the service that condemns, the ministration of doom. That's what the amplified version says, the ministration of doom. Oh God, I'm actually glad that I made this video because I love how the amplified version put it. The ministration of doom. And when you look in this, it's not there. Oh, you're going to love verse 10. Verse 10 says, verse 10 says in the clear word, because of the unspeakable glorious act of God in giving his son to die for us, the Old Testament services are now at an end. That's what it says, that the Old Testament services are now at an end. Hear what the KJV says. For even that which was made glorious has had no glory in this respect, by reason of the glory that excelleth. It's talking the what was written on the tables of the on stone, that was given to Moses, that glory no longer has any more glory. But they say the Old Testament services and it did not identify, you understand, that it's the tables written on stone given to Moses, that glory has done away. They say it's the Old Testament services is done away in the Clear Word Bible. Last but not least, verse 11 says, if that which lasted for only a short time was so glorious, how much more glorious is that? What it's talking is the Old Testament services. You see the inconsistency? How can it be talking Old Testament services when in verse 6, right? Verse 6 and verse 7, it says, at Sinai God wrote the law on tables of stone. Even their own Bible defeats them, It's the same tables of stone mentioned in verse 7. That is what it's talking about in verse 10. But they completely, instead of being consistent, they completely change it and say Old Testament service rather than the law and tables that was given to Moses. Is now done away. They change it now and say Old Testament services. Great inconsistency there, because they couldn't be consistent in this text, else they would have defeated themselves. You understand? Now I have one final thing to look at, and that is Colossians chapter 2 verse 16 and 17, and then I'll close. Oh, you're going to love this. Verse 16 to 17. Don't let anyone control your life by giving you a set of ceremonial rules about what to eat, what to drink, and which monthly festivals or special Sabbaths to keep. All these rules about ceremonial days were given as a shadow of the reality to come, and that reality is Jesus Christ. So they identify in verse 16 that what is mentioned there are a set of ceremonial rules. Now, Now, if you check any Strong's Concordance and read it from it, you'll realize that the word ceremonial, it's not there in the text. Ceremonial cannot be found in the text. You understand? And not only this, you notice they identify special Sabbath. Amplified version says or a new moon or a Sabbath. ESV, or a new moon or a Sabbath. NASB, a new moon or a Sabbath. NLT, new moon ceremonies or Sabbaths. You understand? And the KJV said of the new moon or of the Sabbath days. You understand? And you notice that they mention about special Sabbaths. Because what they say in their theology, is that it's certain Sabbaths that was actually taken to the cross, not the weekly Sabbath. So they inserted special Sabbaths there in order to give the reader the idea that it's certain Sabbaths that was sent to the cross. And there still remains one Sabbath, which is the weekly Sabbath. You understand? So, as I close this, I could give you scores more, There are far more in it that I could show, but I just select the ones that directly put their teaching in conflict. And you see how well, how craftily they reinterpret it with some eisegesis and so forth. They redefine every single one of those texts that I mentioned. Right? Now, I apologize for making this video so long. I have another video that I'll be doing that will be in, basically, it will be like an addition to this one, right? Wherein I'll explain why the word ceremonial was actually inserted into that text. Because what they have it to say, it's the ceremonial laws that were sent to the cross and not the moral law or moral laws. It's ceremonial laws that were sent to the cross. And they have it to say that the Sabbath is a moral law and the 10 Commandments is a moral law. I have another video where that is concerned coming up. I guarantee it won't be as lengthy as this. Again, I apologize, but I do hope that you enjoyed this video and that you are indeed edified by it. If you did, please like, comment where necessary, subscribe to my channel and click the bell icon so that you can receive notifications whenever I make new uploads. And last but not least, share this video with whom you know will benefit from an amazing video like this. Bye bye now.